Men require less validation to take a jump. They'll just do it. Much earlier in my career, burnout for me was all physical because of the hours I was spending in the office and the time I was getting home. There's no point worrying about things that you can't change.
The more I shared, the more people cared.
Because they're bought into it and then it becomes their plan, and so they feel like they have to also achieve it. When things are tougher, it's hard.
How do you bounce back from setbacks when they land on your desk or in your direction?
Goodness. I guess.
Welcome to Women Who Lead. This is the podcast that I wish I'd had when I was a woman in leadership just starting out. So my friends, I have done you a big favor. I have selected some of the most inspiring women in leadership, and I've assembled them in a series of conversations where they're going to share their tips, tricks, frameworks, stories, everything to support you to bloom into the next season of your career.
Welcome to Women Who Lead, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Charmain Manning. Charmain, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ruth. Lovely to be here.
Now, you are a woman who absolutely leads as CEO of Urban, and you are a woman that I'm lucky to have known for a little bit of time now, and I've been able to watch and really be in awe of you in some of your career as I've watched you sort of take up space. So I'm really excited by some of what you're going to share with us today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
First question, what does it mean to you to be in bloom in work and in life?
So in work, in bloom is when, for me, having been a former CFO and CEO, is you're hitting all your numbers, all your projects are going on, hitting all the milestones, you're not worried, you're thinking into the future positively, your team are happy, everyone's happy, there's a buzz. So that would be in bloom in work, and the prospects for the future look good. In life, that makes life a lot easier outside of work. It means that you have less anxiety, that you're less stressed, and so you can enjoy the time when you're not in front of your computer better because your head is still not there. Your head has managed to leave that space.
And it's hard, right, to have that dividing line between work and everything else. And so, I mean, how good are you at actually leaving it behind?
I would say it depends. If things are going well, I'm quite good. When things are tougher, it's hard. Like you're doing the chores or you're using that time to actually think through like what you've got to do. Or even if you're going for a run or something, you're still thinking through, right, what is it I've got to do now?
Yeah.
And so it's very hard to leave it alone. I've found that definitely more so having moved to CEO as opposed to CFO. You don't really stop thinking about it, I'd say.
Yeah, right now you're in the trenches of doing that big job, right? Mm-hmm. So are you able to find a way to navigate that without sacrificing your well-being? Or would you say that you feel that you're trying to balance?
I feel like I'm trying to balance, yeah. I mean, you do have time. So me personally, I'm on or I'm off, right? So I'm go, and then I stop. And when I stop, it's like, don't ask me anything because I'm off. I'm sat. I'm not going to move. I'm just watching TV. That's what I'm doing. But it's very hard to do that.
Yeah. And would you say that you have specific strategies for managing burnout? Are there things that you've learned to do? I say this as a woman of a certain age, I'm in my 40s. I've had to evolve my working practices as I've aged and as I continue to age. So yeah, what does that look like for you?
I don't know how we define burnout. Is it physical or mental? I would say much earlier in my career, burnout for me was all physical because of literally the hours I was spending in the office and the time I was getting home, right? Getting home at like 11, midnight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., that kind of thing. That was a physical burnout. I think mental, I wouldn't say burnout, but mental challenges. I'm quite pragmatic, so I kind of think to myself, can I do anything about this? No, just leave it. Like, stop wasting your mental energy. You can't fix this. There's nothing that can be done. It's going to happen. You just got to let it go. So I think that you kind of have to do. There's no point worrying about things that you can't change. So that's one attempt I try. I think about it. I think through practically what I can do, and then I put it back in the box.
Yeah, because that's all you can do, right? I don't know, life for me has become a bit of an act of surrender. I don't know. I think if I'm to compare myself to who I was a decade ago, I was way more in the, I'm trying to control this thing, and I'm trying to control the outcome of this thing, and I'm terrified of this thing not and actually now, certainly in the season that I've just been in most recently, of discarding, of divorce, of change, of big changes like that, it is to surrender to what you can't control.
change.
Yeah.
You just got to accept it and minimize the impact.
Yeah, but for our listeners who are like, okay, yeah, that's cool, gang, but how on earth am I supposed to accept the things that I can't change? What would you say to me if I'm listening now and I'm thinking, but wait, I just need it to be this way?
So often I kind of think through in a very strategic, okay, so if this does happen and I can't change it, what are the outcomes of that? What are the potential outcomes? And then to change it, what actually does it require? And how can I get those things? So does it require new people, more money, more time? To be honest, most things come down to in work, time or money. So what do you do about those two things? But there are some things like health, things that are outside of it you can't change. It's difficult.
One of the questions that I had for you is actually about the sort of seasons, right? Because, yes, my company is called Bloom. So I do obviously think about nature a bit in the way that I approach things. But, different seasons of life call for different things, right? Like some seasons we're in a growth season, we're in spring, we're in summer, we're radiating, we're in autumn, things are falling away, we're in winter, in the sort of season of decay. If you think back on your career and think about it in terms of seasons, which season would you say has shaped or is shaping you the most?
I take some positives from, I guess, the Bloom part where, I had gravitas at work, I was being listened to, I was working with good people who were good leadership, who were very supportive, very dynamic, very action orientated. So I take some of that. And then at the same time, you have to think about the worst bit, not necessarily for me, but not because I was necessarily the worst, but because the people or the environment where I was working just wasn't working. It was pretty challenging. And you had people that had already decided the outcome that weren't listening, that were a bit like, no, it's got to be this way, this can't be right, and very blame culture. So I would take the bit of the in bloom and also a bit of the really tough to be able to navigate the two extremes. So in this conversation, do I need to be more positive and supportive and cooperative and nurturing, versus in this conversation, do I really have to be firmer and lead and say this is how it's got to be?
Yeah, and there's something in that, like so many women struggle with finding the balance of communicating with confidence, with influence, but also with authenticity, right? Of walking that line between actually who do I need to be in this scenario to get to. And so I'm curious for you, when it comes to embracing your role as CEO, I can almost guarantee that that's involved some challenging conversations.
Yeah.
How have you managed to lean into that and step into, I guess, that in a way that feels authentic to you?
So you have to take into account your audience. So who are you talking to? In hindsight, I probably could have been better at adapting my strategy to knowing how they're going to respond, whether they're always going to come back with things or whether it's a person that just kind of slides back into themselves and goes, oh, okay, right. So you kind of got to determine that, like a game of chess, how they're going to come back to you. It is hard to then afterwards put your hat on and go, oh, I should have been more of my left side personality rather than the right side personality. But it's also difficult to balance the two because you just want to be you, but sometimes that, like the way you are, you have to almost put on a little bit of an angle to be able to get things done sometimes.
And obviously you came at being a CEO from being a CFO, so you kind of had the bit, many women who don't have that background, we struggle with the commercial side. I mean, speaking in generalization to a lot of the women that I coach and work with, we're like, don't talk to me about the numbers. And obviously you had that part. But I remember for myself, one of the biggest challenges that I faced was really learning a different language, I guess, at the leadership table. And how do I then carve out a way of being there that feels authentic to me, that feels safe enough to be able to say, I don't know what that means. Can you explain it better?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I struggled with at first was really not being able to say, I don't know what that means. Can you explain it better? And I learned how to do that. But I'm curious, what were some of the challenges that you faced when you were sort of starting to step up to the leadership table, whether as CFO or CEO?
Challenges are around, particularly earlier in my career when I was moving up, is having the confidence to say, I don't have the right support, because particularly in certain roles of my career, you're kind of put in it and you feel like you can't ask for more because you know it's going to add more cost or more whatever, and you're supposed to just handle it. Whereas in hindsight, you need to go in and say, if you want me to deliver these things, this is what I need. If I don't get them, then I'm not going to be able to deliver them.
Yeah.
And then let the business choose. So if it does or doesn't work, you can say, well, this bit worked because I had resource for that. This bit hasn't worked at all because 6 months ago I told you we needed better system or a person to do this. We didn't get it. So with hindsight, I would definitely be more forthright about what it is you need, like formulate your plan and think, I need an expert in this, I need an expert in that, or I need a part-time person in this, or I need to understand how this works, or I need information from this other person in the business. And unless I have that, I can't do these things.
Yeah.
And it's intimidating, especially when you get in a new role, you feel like they've just hired you and you've just got to solve it all yourself. Whereas actually, that just isn't reality.
No.
And you need the right resources, or you need time. You say, I can do it, but it's going to take me more time. What do you want me to do?
Right.
But to be able to have that conversation, you need to have leaders above you that are willing to hear it. And often they're not. They're like, well, we've got you in this. It's 6 months. This is the plan. This is the budget. That's it.
Yeah.
And so when there's a right turn, when things aren't going correctly, they're like, oh, no, but this is the plan.
Yeah.
You've got to stick to the plan. So I would say be more forthright, thinking about what it is you need, because if you fail, it will have been because you knew what to do, but you didn't ask and you didn't do it.
But it is so hard, right? Because this is a muscle that we have to build over time. And how able we feel to ask for things is usually directly correlated to how we feel about ourselves too.
Yeah.
If you're entering into those spaces feeling like you don't belong, feeling like you don't deserve to be there, and that you should just be grateful for what you've got and not ask for more, that's where you end up in this dangerous slippery slope, right? Okay, I'll just take a bit more. It's okay. And then to your point, you sort of kick yourself a few months later where you're like, do you know what? I knew how to make this successful, but I didn't ask. Yeah. And in the meantime, what often happens is we've watched the men around us asking for what they need. Like a lot of my audacity, I'll be honest with you, I learned from watching how men do it. Because I was in talent for such a long time, which is recruitment. I would literally be negotiating with everybody and hearing the difference in the way that men asked for more and the way that men negotiated. It really was quite a big split between us gender-wise. The women would never really ask about the stop, never really push back, or push back just a teeny bit. And I'm curious to get your take on this too. As someone who was in the talent world for like 15 years, pretty much every job that I've ever hired for, we've had a bit more room in the budget.
Oh, right, yeah.
Pretty much every job, we've had a bit more room in the budget. And if you would have asked, you would have got it. Same when it comes to budgeting. You can tell us actually from CFO standpoint, when people push hard to have stuff in their budget, right?
Yes.
What's your experience of that?
I have asked, but you feel so awkward asking, whereas you know that a man would ask. And I'm very good at giving my friends advice on being able to ask, but actually doing it yourself is different. You feel like you have to wrap it up in a polite bundle. If people ask for more, I'm like, well, what's it going to give me? What am I going to get back? And then, okay, I'll hold you to it. It can be done. Some people are better at it than others at asking for more.
And that's it. And I just think, have your business case, right? Yeah. Tell me, be bold.
Yeah. They ask at the right time. They ask before the challenges are coming. So she's more likely to say yes now rather than in 3 months' time. So I'm going to ask for it now.
There's that too.
That's strategic about it.
Yeah, be strategic about when you're asking. What does lie underneath all of this, as we were talking about, is confidence, right?
Yeah.
So in your own world, how have you managed to, first of all, I was going to say create, but maybe I mean reclaim, because I honestly think that we're born confident. Like, we're born in the world. I was a pretty confident kid and I forgot how to be that, right? And then at a certain age, I just sort of became more compliant, right? So I like to say reclaim confidence. How have you managed to reclaim and kind of maintain confidence in the role that you do today?
I was a confident young child, not necessarily through my teenage and youth. And then in my first few jobs, I was pretty confident because I was doing well and people were telling me I was doing well, right? And then you have a bit of things are challenging. And so you lose a bit of that confidence. I try to think about what people who I know that are very confident, how they would do it, what they would do. But sometimes it still astonishes me, the brazen confidence that they have. You realise when you're super confident, you ask people, so other people just back off. They're like, okay, fine, here you go. And you're like, oh, why didn't I just do that? You know, that don't ask, don't get. It's so true, but it is difficult. You're thinking, well, they're going to ask why and why and why, and you haven't got all the answers, so they're not going to give it to you. Whereas actually, they might ask why once, and then they're like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I'm really high on that super confident meter. I think it's also a personality thing, not coming over as aggressive. I think maybe being assertive, but like you say, authentic. I mean, I'm never going to be the person that shouts the loudest in the room. I want people to have said yes and be completely in agreement with it and feel good about it rather than be a bit like, questioning it.
But that is kind of also the whole point of why I wanted to have these conversations, because I don't think that we all need to be the same in leadership. I would love to be part of creating a world where we get to be all of who we are as leaders. And that means that it doesn't mean that we have to adopt tactics that don't feel authentic to us to get what we want. It doesn't mean that we have to do that, but it does mean that we have to step into the most authentic expression of who we are, right? And part of that for me, as I've aged, I've started to become more curious about the balance of masculine and feminine energy in me, right? So the masculine being the leading, driving, I have heaps of that, right? But then also the feminine, the softening, the lunar energy, the creation, the receiving, it's a bit of a different dynamic. And I'm curious about whether that's something that you've ever considered in your role as CEO, and whether that's something that you even think about balancing within yourself, or whether that's come up for you.
I guess I don't actively consider it. I don't actively think I've got it, this side of me versus that side of me. And maybe for certain meetings, you're a bit more conscious that you might have to be a bit more leadership driven as opposed to your general day-to-day, and a bit more directive about what you want and why you want it. I wouldn't say it's a conscious thing. Just be too much to think about what kind of person am I going to be today, which side of me am I going to be today.
I just became curious, right? And I think it's, as I work as a coach today, and I work with men and women, but predominantly, often it's women a lot these days, I'm noticing the differences, right? And we all have it within us. And actually, honestly, a lot of the men I've worked with, I've ended up, sometimes what I'm doing with them is actually helping them uncover some of their feminine energy, right? Whether it's balancing or whether it's a curiosity of mine at the moment. So I wondered if it was something that
I mean, in leadership, you're making big decisions about the way forward. And it feels like sometimes men require less validation to take a jump. They'll just do it. Whereas women will be more questioning. And be like, is it right? What do I need to know? I need to be comfortable. I need to get to this place where I'm comfortable before I make the decision. And it could be on small things, right? With your friend groups, or in businesses, bigger things. And you wonder, how is there such a difference? Most big businesses are run by men. So do you actually have to be more like, let's just do it and see?
I do also want to call out, though, to our listeners and viewers, women being the way that we are does make sense. Like lots of us are like this, and we are more risk averse, and it is about how we're conditioned in the world, right? Like it is part nature, part nurture, whatever we want to call it. It can be harder for us to operate in that way in a world where the bar is higher for us. We're kind of in this double bind, right? We're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. If we ask for more, we're aggressive. If we don't ask, then we don't get it. And so this is a hard path to walk, right? And I do want to acknowledge that too. Yeah,
I agree.
So obviously in the world of work, most of us come up against challenges sometimes, right? How do you bounce back from setbacks when they land on your desk or in your direction?
You've kind of talk to your team, you get opinions on it, on what the nature of the setback is, try to understand, the cause, and then you have to lead or let the smartest person on the topic lead and advise, like, this is a way to do it. And you have to have options. I think with everything, you've got to think, okay, there are 3 ways we can approach this. Which one are we going to go with first, and what's our backup type thing? Personal setbacks, I'm pretty good, like, be it health or whatever, I'm pretty good at picking myself up and getting on with it. I don't dwell too much on the past. I'm like, it's done now. Just move forward. We just got to get up, because it's that survival mode. Like, I have got to survive. I have got to look after my family, look after my business, whatever it is. We just keep going, and you just keep running. You don't have time to sit around and dwell on it. You've just got to move forward.
Yeah.
It's a survival mode, I think.
And how do you then balance that, right? So understandably, when it is the survival of a business or the survival of a something, we are in that, like, action, okay, let's go, what do we need to do mode, right?
Yes.
Which can mean that we're very much up in our heads and not necessarily in our bodies. And so we're kind of overriding maybe some of what the body might need or what it might want and those sorts of things. How much work have you done on kind of, I guess, establishing or becoming conscious of that kind of mind-body connection in those sorts of circumstances?
Actively with someone that can advise me, probably not very much. I don't think I've ever had that kind of coaching or leadership or training or anything like that. No. Nowadays, if I'm like that, I will just get up from my desk and take my dog for a walk and have that 10, 15 minutes of trying to think through when you're out in the open air, maybe. It's that quiet space where you just need to be calm and be still.
No, but that's beautiful, because that's so grounding, right? And what you've actually done without even probably thinking about it is done, when we're actually up in our heads, that's a very, like, that's an airy place, right? If we're thinking of the elements, right? That's where anxiety is. Everything is swirling and moving and whatever. And actually the antidote to that, even the ancient wisdom of things like Ayurveda, right? It would be to ground. It would be to ground in things like earth, or maybe the heaviness of water, something that brings you out of being up here, basically, which is quite beautiful. So your instincts to be in nature and ground yourself is actually, therefore, probably the medicine you need. So just
unloading the dishwasher count? Because I do that almost flawlessly. And while I'm doing it, I'm thinking about all the stuff that needs doing.
Yeah, well, that's probably then you're still in your mind.
Yeah. Is that why the bowls end up in the fridge?
If you, though, were really, really studying each thing coming out of the dishwasher.
No. Yeah, no.
And being like, wow, look at this bowl. Goodness me, I'm so lucky to have it. Then that would probably count as something to bring you out of here.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, we've covered so much together today. And I think just as a sort of final thing that I would love to ask you, is there any one thing that you just kind of wish that you'd learned sooner in your career?
What I said about being confident. Someone tells you, achieve, right, you're in this role, these are your responsibilities, this is what you have to achieve. And once you've thought about how you're doing it, going back to them and getting their buy-in, making sure they know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and you tell them what you need. Because that's the only way you can get sign-off on it and get support and do it all together. I think you just have to go back. You can't just squirrel away for work for months and then come back and go, here, bang. You've got to present a plan back to somebody and say, if this is what you want me to do, this is how I'm going to do it. Or this is what I need to do it. And I wish I'd done that, maybe.
That was very radical for me in my career too, when I realised that the more I shared, the more people cared. I didn't mean to make that rhyme, but it did.
Yeah,
but
because they're bought into it and then it becomes their plan, and so they feel like they have to also achieve it.
Yeah.
But if you go off and try and just struggle by yourself, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And I called them like ta-da moments, right? I think earlier in your career, you think you have to go off and solve the thing and come back and go, ta-da, I did it. And then when you actually start to let other people, to be seen and to let other people into what you're working on, they just get way more invested in it.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier because then, first of all, you get some different opinions around the challenges that come up, right? which is great, so you're not in your own kind of echo chamber, then they do just care more about the project in general.
And if I think about, my team, or if I've asked them to go away and achieve something, I would feel more comfortable when they come back to me with a plan and say, this is what we're doing and why, and this is when we'll know when it will work, and this is what we need. So I feel like I've got a more finger on the pulse of what's going on and whether it's working or not. And I would not want them to go away and come back to me in 6 months. No way.
No, exactly. I love that. And that is a beautiful note to end on, because teamwork makes the dream work, quite literally, And I think the more that we realise that actually we don't need to be fighting this on our own, frankly, the easier that it gets.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very happy to have women like you as, trusted advisors and confidence here and there. So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you making time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. If you have liked this episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear some of what we were talking about. Go and check out our other episodes, and then also head over to ourtimetobloom.com to find out more about Bloom and how you can get involved.